When you think of Priscilla Presley, you probably picture elegance, grace, and the woman who captured the heart of the king of rock and roll. But behind that famous smile and those beautiful eyes lies a story filled with more heartbreak than most of us could ever imagine. Today, as Priscilla celebrates her 80th birthday, we need to talk about the tragedies that have shaped her life and the incredible strength it took to survive them all. Priscilla Presley is not just Elvis's ex-wife. She's a survivor of loss, manipulation, heartbreak, and betrayal. And as she enters her 9th decade of life, the weight of everything she's been through is truly beyond heartbreaking. So sit back, because we're about to dive deep into the life of a woman who has faced more pain than anyone should ever have to endure. Let's start at the very beginning, because Priscilla's story of tragedy actually begins long before she ever met Elvis. Born Priscilla in Wagner in Brooklyn, New York, in 1945, her early childhood was already marked by loss. Her biological father, James Wagner, was a Navy pilot who died in a plane crash when Priscilla was just 6 months old. Can you imagine growing up without ever knowing your father? Without ever hearing his voice or feeling his arms around you? That kind of loss leaves a mark on a person's soul that never really goes away. Her mother remarried an Air Force officer named Paul Beaulieu, who adopted Priscilla and gave her his last name. The family moved around a lot because of military life, and Priscilla never really had a stable home or lasting friendships. She was always a new girl, always trying to fit in, always feeling a little bit lost. And then, when she was just 14 years old, her entire world changed forever. It was 1959, and Priscilla's family was stationed in Germany. That's where she met Elvis Presley, who was serving in the army at the time. He was already a massive star, the biggest name in music, and he was 24 years old. She was just a child, really, a 14-year-old girl who was lonely and looking for something to fill the emptiness inside her. And Elvis, with all his charm and charisma, seemed like a dream come true. But here's where the tragedy really begins. Their relationship started when she was still a child, and Elvis had all the power. He was older, famous, wealthy, and experienced. She was young, vulnerable, and desperate for love and attention. From the very start, their relationship was unequal and problematic. Elvis didn't want a partner. He wanted someone he could shape and mold into his perfect woman. And Priscilla, who was just a teenager trying to find her place in the world, became his project. When Elvis returned to the United States, he convinced Priscilla's parents to let her move to Memphis to finish high school. Think about that for a moment. A teenage girl living in the home of a grown man who was one of the most famous people on earth. Her parents agreed because they trusted Elvis, because he was charming and respectful to them, and because Priscilla begged them. But this decision would shape the rest of her life in ways nobody could have predicted. Living at Graceland was like living in a beautiful prison. Elvis controlled everything about Priscilla's life. He decided what she wore, how she did her hair and makeup, what she ate, who she could see, and where she could go. He wanted her to look a certain way, with heavy black eyeliner, teased hair, and clothes that matched his vision of the perfect woman. Priscilla lost herself completely. She became exactly what Elvis wanted her to be. And in the process, she forgot who she really was. And through all of this, she was still just a kid. She should have been going to football games and school dances, worrying about homework and hanging out with friends her own age. Instead, she was living in a mansion with a man who kept her isolated from the normal world. She couldn't develop her own identity or discover what she wanted from life. Everything was about Elvis and his needs and his desires. They finally got married in 1967, when Priscilla was 21 years old. By that point, she had already spent 7 years under Elvis's control. The wedding was quick and small, and many people believe Elvis only married her because of pressure from his manager and concerns about his image. It wasn't the fairy tale romance everyone imagined. It was complicated and messy and built on a foundation of control rather than equal partnership. Exactly 9 months after the wedding, their daughter Lisa Marie was born. For a brief moment, Priscilla thought she might finally have a family and the love she had always dreamed of. She adored being a mother, and Lisa Marie became the center of her world. But Elvis's interest in Priscilla as a wife had already started to fade. He had affairs with his co-stars and other women, and Priscilla knew about them but felt powerless to do anything about it. Elvis had this strange idea that mothers weren't supposed to be sexual beings. Once Priscilla became a mom, he stopped seeing her as a romantic partner. He still wanted her at home, still wanted her to be there for him when he needed her, but he was getting his romantic fulfillment elsewhere. Can you imagine how painful that must have been? To give up your entire identity for someone, to mold yourself into exactly what they wanted, and then to be cast aside the moment you became a mother? Priscilla felt trapped and alone. She had a daughter to care for, a husband who was emotionally distant and unfaithful, and no real sense of who she was as a person. She had spent her entire adult life being Elvis's wife and nothing more. She had no career, no education beyond high school, no skills or experiences to fall back on. She was completely dependent on Elvis for everything. The loneliness drove her to have an affair with a karate instructor. It wasn't about love or even physical attraction. It was about finally having someone pay attention to her, someone who saw her as a real person with feelings and desires of her own. But when Elvis found out, he was furious. The man who had been unfaithful throughout their entire relationship couldn't handle the fact that his wife had sought comfort elsewhere. The hypocrisy was stunning, but that's how toxic their relationship had become. In 1973, Priscilla finally found the courage to leave. After 13 years with Elvis, she walked away from Graceland and started trying to build a life of her own. The divorce was finalized that same year, and it was relatively amicable considering everything. They agreed to share custody of Lisa Marie, and Elvis made sure Priscilla was financially taken care of. But even though she was finally free, the emotional damage had been done. She was 27 years old and had to figure out who Priscilla Presley really was underneath all the layers Elvis had built. She started taking acting classes and working on building career. She landed some small roles on television and started to discover her own interests and passions. For the first time in her adult life, she was making her own decisions and living on her own terms. It was scary and exciting and empowering all at the same time. She was finally becoming herself. But just as she was finding her footing, tragedy struck again. In August of 1977, Elvis died at Graceland. He was only 42 years old, and his death shocked the entire world. For Priscilla, it was devastating in ways most people couldn't understand. Yes, they were divorced. Yes, their relationship had been toxic and controlling. But Elvis had been such a huge part of her life for so long. He was the father of a child, and despite everything, she still cared about him deeply. And then there was the guilt. Priscilla wondered if she could have done more to help him. Elvis had been struggling with prescription drug addiction for years, and everyone around him knew it, but nobody seemed able to stop it. Could she have saved him if she had tried harder? Should she have done something different? These questions haunted her, even though deep down she knew that Elvis's demons were not her responsibility to fix. After Elvis died, Priscilla had to step up in a major way. The estate was a mess, drowning in debt and poorly managed. Graceland was costing a fortune to maintain, and there were people everywhere trying to take advantage of the situation. Priscilla could have walked away and let someone else deal with it all, but she didn't. She fought to protect Elvis's legacy and, more importantly, to protect her daughter's inheritance. She made the bold decision to turn Graceland into a tourist attraction. A lot of people thought she was crazy. They said it would be disrespectful to Elvis's memory, that fans wouldn't want to visit, that it would never work. But Priscilla proved them all wrong. Graceland became one of the most visited homes in America, and the Elvis Presley estate went from being millions in debt to being worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Through all of this, Priscilla was also trying to build her own career and identity. She continued acting and eventually landed a major role on the television show Dallas and later in the Naked Gun movies. She proved that she was more than just Elvis's ex-wife. She was talented and smart and capable in her own right. She built a successful career and became a savvy businesswoman who saved the Presley legacy from ruin. But even as professional success came her way, personal happiness seemed to always slip through her fingers. She had several relationships after Elvis, but none of them seemed to work out. There was a long relationship with a businessman that ended badly. There were rumors of other romances that fizzled out. It seemed like Priscilla just couldn't find someone who loved her for who she really was, not for her connection to Elvis or her fame or her money. And then, in the early 2000s, something truly disturbing happened. Priscilla fell into a relationship with a man who manipulated and took advantage of her in terrible ways. This person convinced her to undergo cosmetic procedures that left her face damaged and disfigured. The procedures were botched, and Priscilla was left with lumps and distortions in her face from bad filler injections. For a woman who had spent her whole life being known for her beauty, this was absolutely devastating. She had to go through multiple corrective procedures to try to fix the damage, and even though she's spoken about it bravely, you can tell it still affects her. The fact that someone she trusted could do this to her, could take advantage of her insecurities and leave her physically scarred, is just another example of the betrayal she's endured throughout her life. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared Priscilla for the tragedy that came next. In January of 2023, her daughter Lisa Marie died suddenly at the age of 54. She had a cardiac arrest at home and was rushed to the hospital, but doctors couldn't save her. Just like that, Priscilla's only child was gone. For a mother, there is no greater pain than losing a child. It doesn't matter how old that child is. Lisa Marie was Priscilla's whole world, the one person who connected her to Elvis and the one person who truly understood what her life had been like. They had been through so much together, and now Lisa Marie was gone. The grief was unbearable, unimaginable, beyond anything words could describe. And the tragedy didn't end there. After Lisa Marie's death, a bitter legal battle erupted over her estate and her will. There were questions about who would control the Presley fortune and who would be the guardian of Lisa Marie's twin daughters. Priscilla found herself in the middle of a public fight with her own granddaughter Riley Keough, Lisa Marie's oldest daughter from her first marriage. The dispute was eventually settled out of court, but the damage had been done. At a time when the family should have been coming together to grieve and support each other, they were instead fighting over money and control. For Priscilla, who had already lost so much, this must have felt like salt in an open wound. Not only had she lost a daughter, but now she was in conflict with her grandchildren during the darkest time of her life. Today, at 80 years old, Priscilla carries the weight of all these tragedies with her. She lost her father before she ever knew him. She lost her childhood and teenage years to a controlling relationship. She lost her identity for years as she tried to be what Elvis wanted. She lost her marriage. She lost Elvis himself. She lost her daughter. And in many ways, she lost her relationship with some of her grandchildren, at least temporarily. But here's the thing about Priscilla Presley that we need to understand. Despite all this heartbreak, despite all the loss and pain and betrayal, she's still standing. She's still fighting. She's still moving forward. That takes a kind of strength most of us can't even comprehend. She continues to work on preserving Elvis's legacy, not because she's stuck in the past, but because she knows how much it means to millions of fans around the world and how important it is for her grandchildren. She continues to make public appearances, supporting causes she believes in and staying connected to the world even when it would be easier to retreat into privacy and isolation. She's also become an advocate for awareness about the dangers of cosmetic procedures and the importance of being careful about who you trust with your health and your body. She's spoken openly about her own experiences, hoping to prevent others from going through what she went through. That kind of vulnerability and willingness to help others even after being hurt yourself is remarkable. Looking at Priscilla's life, it's easy to focus on all the sadness and tragedy. And there's no question that she's been through more than her fair share of heartbreak. But there's also something incredibly inspiring about her story. She's a survivor. She took the broken pieces of her life and built something meaningful from them. She found her own identity after years of not having one. She became a successful businesswoman and actress on her own merits. She protected her family's legacy and secured her daughters' and grandchildren's future. The tragedy of Priscilla Presley is beyond heartbreaking. That's absolutely true. But the triumph of Priscilla Presley is equally powerful. She represents the resilience of the human spirit and the ability to keep going even when everything seems lost. At 80, she's still here, still strong, still fighting, still surviving. Her story reminds us that behind every famous face is a real person with real pain and real struggles. It reminds us that wealth and fame don't protect you from loss and heartbreak. And it reminds us that no matter what life throws at us, we have the strength within ourselves to keep moving forward, to keep surviving, to keep finding reasons to wake up every morning and face another day. Priscilla Presley has lived a life marked by tragedy, but she's also lived a life marked by incredible strength, determination, and grace. She's been knocked down more times than we can count, but she's always gotten back up. And that, more than anything else, is what makes a story so powerful and so important to tell. As we think about Priscilla at 80, let's not just focus on the sadness and the loss. Let's also celebrate the survivor, the fighter, the woman who refused to let tragedy define her entire existence. She's still here, still standing, still Priscilla. And that, in itself, is pretty amazing. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share this video with others who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Let us know in the comments what you think about Priscilla's journey and what inspires you most about her strength. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, no matter what you're going through, you have the power to keep going just like Priscilla has done all these years.